Microphone's on. Woo! Hey, here we go, live to YouTube. Hopefully we're coming through loud and clear. We have 191 already tuned in, Tom. How good is that? I've got Tom Putt with me. Before I introduce him, a couple of little things. Whoop. We are coming through because that's coming through my phone. Good to have everyone here. A couple of things before we start. Tom has been generous enough to give us his time and energy and present his photography absolutely free. There's a couple of things that we can do to thank him and support him. Number one, whilst we're just warming up here, click on the share button below, share it on Facebook, share it to your photography friends, get as many eyes here, as much exposure, photographers love exposure, on Tom Putt's presentation as possible. A couple of other things. What else you can do? Have a look in the link below. Tom Putt's got 8 or 10 free ebooks on his website, and I placed a direct link to those ebooks in the description below. So you're going to get some great benefit by signing up to those ebooks, improve your photography, but you're also going to support Tom, join his email list, get his updates, all of those great things. What else can we do? What else can we do? That's about it. Let's welcome Tom Putt. Before we do, let me run through some recent awards. I had a look on his website. The awards were too long. There's some behind him there on the wall. There's about 100, maybe 200. Some of the highlights though. 2020, this year in the 6th Fine Art Photography Awards, first place in the Professional Panoramic category, third place in the Professional Abstract category, absolutely incredible. 2019, we have some highlights: International Photography Awards, Nature Photographer of the Year, and Aerial Drone Series first place. There it is there, absolutely incredible. Also in 2019, Black and White Spider Awards, second in the Nature category. 2018 Epson Awards, second place. International Photography Awards, Nature Drone Series, second place. Absolutely phenomenal. Outdoor Photographer of the Year category winner, View from Above. Unbelievable. What an incredible photographer, and he's a top bloke, generous soul. What else did you tell me that I had to say, Tom? I can't remember. It's here. Anyway, he is a really good bloke. Let's welcome Tom Putt. Thanks for coming along, Tom.
Thanks very much for having me. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. I'll share my screen in a second. Thanks, Adam, for that introduction. Really appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to present to everybody on the live feed today. 223 odd, something like that.
It's a record. And, it's already a record.
Well, let's see. That'll probably drop off pretty damn quickly when people get a little bit bored of me, perhaps, and go, this guy's a bit full of himself. But I wanted to thank you for your generosity, Adam. I know I said this to you yesterday, but I love getting up in the mornings and knowing I've got that 10 o'clock appointment with you and many others on your feed, and I really want to acknowledge you for being so generous and bringing everybody together at this time when it's difficult. I mean, photography generally is a pretty lonesome sort of profession anyway, but to have that opportunity to all get together in the mornings, I think's a credit to you, mate. So thank you very much for bringing everybody together at this time. I hope it continues beyond all of this, and you know, we can look back with fond memories of all the things that we did at the start, but also continue to do. So thanks for that, Adam.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure.
The other thing that I wanted to do was that we all know Adam is incredibly generous. Well, this parcel arrived in the post for me this week from Adam, and I thought, God, what's this? I mean, isn't he giving everybody enough? But he sent me this. Look, you'll never believe it. He sent me this T-shirt with my name on it. He's spelt it correctly, which is fat. But look, that's not it. That's not everything. Look at this. I love this. I love the guy in many different ways, but this takes the cake. Look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Amazing. I'm glad you got it right. I'm glad you saw that I am world famous. Thank you for that. Perhaps even more so after this presentation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, mate. You will be known worldwide.
All right. Well, enough of that. Let's get into the journey. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm not sure if many of you have seen this presentation before. I used to sort of peddle this out about 3 or 4 years ago when I was doing the camera club circuit, and I probably 12, 18 months presented the same thing, which was, here's my journey in photography, here's where I started, here's where I'm at now, here's where I want to go. Well, what happened was that I actually lost that presentation somewhere in a computer migration or something else, lost the photos, lost the presentation, and have been meaning for some time to go back and rebuild it and obviously update it. And so for those who may have seen this already, you're going to see something brand new. You might see stuff that you've seen already, but you'll certainly see some new stuff, and it's completely up to date. So I really hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, mate.
So Adam, I'm going to share the screen and let's get going. How does that sound?
Let's do it, mate. Let's do it.
Okay, I'm going to share the desktop here. I hope you're seeing all of that.
We are, mate. We are. Just for the audience at home, I'm going to stay on the microphone, and if you have any questions, put them up there and I'll pose them to Tom as we go.
Yes, please do that, because I want to answer them as we go along, okay? So let's get that logo in the right place. No, that's not important. My journey in photography started many, many, many years ago. In fact, my sort of first recollection of photography was, in fact, my dad, who is still a very keen photographer and takes his camera wherever he goes. But he would always have a camera on him and would bring it to swimming carnivals such as this one. We've got a very rich history, photographic history of our family growing up. Of course, all in print, all 6x4 inch photographs. And they're scattered throughout boxes and everything else around the place. But very much a case of always had the camera and always was very much documenting our growing up. I hope that I've done just as good a job in documenting my kids growing up. I'm not sure, but we'll see. When I was 9 years old, I got into the study of birds, ornithology it's called, and I became an amateur ornithologist, if you could call it such, bird watching. I love birds, and I got involved with a group called the Victorian Way to Study Group. And this was taken a few years after I got into birds. This is, I was 13 years old in this particular photo. This was the first catch I went on, and this is all for scientific purposes, where they still to this day go out and catch, band and release birds, okay, to understand their behaviour, their longevity, their migration patterns, things like that. This is a pied oyster catcher down at the Werribee Sewage Farm, and in the background there, you'll see that there's a net on the ground, and this is called a cannon net procedure. A gentleman from the UK called Dr. Clive Minton brought this to Australia in the late 70s in order to catch flocks of birds roosting at high tide. And I was involved with them for many, many years. And in fact, Clive was instrumental in my photography during my teenage years. He would encourage me in every way. He is, or was, I should say, sadly passed away only last year. Clive was a very keen photographer himself, very well known in the ornithological circles, and organised a few trips for us to go away to photograph specifically. This one here is of a bird called the glossy ibis. At the time that this was taken in the 90s, these birds were considered quite rare, and he had a friend who owned a rice farm up near Balranald in southern New South Wales, and he invited me up there for a few days in order to photograph these birds nesting, and there were huge flocks of these birds nesting. This photograph came about by I built a hide made out of PVC tubing and got my mum to sew this cloth to go over the top of it. And this was actually in the swamp, which was a huge swamp that the farmer had laid bare in order for the birds in order to nest. And I'm standing in probably waist-deep water here for several hours, waiting for these birds to come back to their nests and photograph them. Of course, all on slide film. When I was at university, after I left school, I didn't study a degree in photography. I was far more interested in psychology and sociology. But then I got involved in triathlon, and I like showing this off because I don't look nearly as good as that these days. But that's at the Australian Championships in Geelong, and I know that sounds very prestigious. I was just an age group triathlete, very much middle of the road, and all you needed to do was basically pay your entry fee to enter, and you got in. You didn't have to qualify as such. But I there am in the Australian Championships, and I really got involved in triathlon. I loved it to death. Greg Welsh won the Australian or the World Championships in Kailua Kona in Hawaii in 1994, the first non-American to win, and I was hooked. And I would compete every season, probably 10 races or so. I wasn't an overly good triathlete, but I certainly loved it. And recently I was asked what one of my greatest life achievements has been, and I put down running a marathon. And this is a photograph of me finishing my first marathon, which was in Adelaide. The time at the top is what I achieved, which I'm not a runner at all. That's the thing. I can't run. If I ran around the block today, that would be enough. But I trained after one particular season and did quite well. That's about 4.5 minute Ks for anyone who knows running speeds, etc. And so the 2:59 at the bottom was what I put on this photograph afterwards to give myself that goal of perhaps running sub 3 hours. I fortunately didn't achieve that goal. I ran my next marathon 5 years later. Did a little bit slower than this first one, but yeah, did quite well in the sort of athletics fields. My grandmother, who again has since passed away, gave me a Canon film camera for my 21st birthday back in 1995. And with that, when I wasn't competing in triathlon, I would go to triathlons and photograph them. And so this is my good friend Rowan Veal, who at the time was competing for the RMIT triathlon group. And this ended up making the front cover of the RMIT magazine. And so with that, I started to get encouragement about perhaps this being more than just a bit of a hobby, but I could perhaps make a little bit of money out of this, photographing triathlon. And while I was at university, go ahead, there's a question. Yeah, I did my first triathlon back in 1994. I ran my first marathon in 97. And so the sort of period of my triathlon career as such went from 1994 through to 2003 when my daughter was born. Okay. Thanks for that question. With that, I was still at university, but I would cram all of my tutorials and all of my assignments to be ready in the first half of the semester so that I could then leave to go to Hawaii and photograph the Hawaii Ironman triathlon. Every year I went in 96, 97 and also 2001. And I would just go as a freelancer, not necessarily have any photographs in which to sell, but I was successful enough to sell quite a few of them to the local magazines back here in Australia. And I was really obsessed with probably triathlon and photography and combined the two. And for those who may or may not know of this race, it's a 3.8 kilometre ocean swim without a wetsuit, of course, because it's in Hawaii, it's very warm. It's a 180 kilometre bike ride through the lava fields of Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii called Kailua Kona, or Hawaii is the actual name of the island. But this race starts and ends in Kailua Kona. And then it's a run 42.2 kilometres, which is a marathon through the lava fields. Most of the pros do it these days in about 8 hours, which is phenomenal. I mean, you can have 90%, 95%, 99% humidity, temperatures 35 degrees plus. It really is a brutal race, and it is the World Championship of Ironman Triathlon. If you haven't seen any of the races from this event, you must. I just YouTube it. I'm sure there'll be something online. And this was back in 2001 where I got sent to photograph the event. Amazing event, great photographs. These guys run, you know, all well into the night. The cutoff time for this race is 12 midnight. With that, while I was at uni, I became obsessed with photography, more so than I was already. And I'm glad I found this. I only found this yesterday. This is a magazine photograph that I clipped out of the magazine, showing off all the photographers at the Australian Open, and that's Monica Seles holding the trophy there, I believe. And this I cut out and I stapled to the front cover of my diary at uni to inspire me to become a professional sports photographer. So while I was at university, I was obsessed with being my career once I left. I would clip out newspaper clippings everywhere. These are my scrapbooks that I still have today. Just ideas, thoughts, concepts that I'd want to mimic. and really wanted to emulate. And I still do that to this day. I don't keep a scrapbook, of course. We've got Instagram and Facebook, etc. But I still consume a lot of media looking for ideas and inspiration. In January 1998, I was fortunate enough to get a gig with a friend of mine, Delhi Carr, who I'm still very good friends with. And Delhi was running a sports photo agency and couldn't go to the 1998 World Swimming Championships in Perth. So he sent me along as his photographer. And this was a really sort of, coming out experience for me, not in that way, but as a photographer, because really I'd never done anything, big or for somebody else before. And this event was really a birthing experience for me. I met some great photographers along the way. They were all wondering who this young guy was who was coming along. I was only 23 years age. And so there I really sort of cut my teeth in terms of sports photography. This photograph was actually an accident. This was where I had shot it on E6 and processed it as C24 or vice versa. So we got this cool cross-processing effect. Shortly after that, October 1998, less than 12 months after leaving uni and really not having a job and not knowing what I was going to do, but still very keen to be a sports photographer, I was actually hired by a leading sports photographic agency here in Melbourne called Sport the Library. And at the time, they were the official photographers to the Australian Olympic Committee. I'll get to that in a sec. They would send me to the Australian Open, so I became one of those photographers, just like in the photograph that I showed you previously. And I would go to the Australian Open plus many other events. I estimated that I covered probably 300 events in the 3 years that I was with that agency. I was their staff photographer, so I worked in the business as well as photographing. So I would be in the library cataloguing photographs and answering phone calls and meeting with clients at the same time that I would be out photographing as well. So it was a real, encompassing sort of job. This one here is taken from the roof at Rod Laver Arena of Pat Rafter back in about 1999, 2000, something like that. In fact, I'm really pleased with this photograph. The lab that we would process all our film through, this is transparency slide film days, guys. This is well before digital. This photograph got processed by the lab, who were on site in the sort of burrows underneath the stands of the tennis centre there. And they printed this photograph. They loved it so much that the lab printed it and stuck it to the wall. And all of these professional photographers would come in to get their film processed, including Bob Martin from Sports Illustrated. And they would see these photographs on the walls, the best of the best. And they'd admire them, obviously. And in fact, quite a few of the photographers thought this was actually taken by Bob Martin from Sports Illustrated rather than, this 23, 24-year-old kid from Melbourne, Australia. So the timing of that was such that I probably took a good 50 to 100 photos to get that. It's all about having his shadow in the picture, but then having it such that part of him is against the shadow of the stand in the background, but still the racket and the ball are in the sunlight. So you can imagine, and trying to have the ball as close to the racket as possible. So you can imagine that there were many photographs to try and get that correct. I showed this to my wife, Mary, I'll call her my wife because it's just too hard to say anything else, is that she's a big fan of Andre Agassi, and I showed her this one. After each Australian Open, they have a photo call afterwards the following day, and they take the champions to a certain place in Melbourne, and this was down at St Kilda Beach. I remember this quite fondly. He was a super nice guy, and there were heaps of other photographers. It wasn't just me. They'd placed the sponsor's beer in ice inside the trophy, and immediately he got there, he saw it, and he ushered his entourage, and he said, "I can't do that with those beers in that trophy." He obviously either didn't agree with it, or he wasn't sponsored by that particular alcoholic company. So they got taken out pretty damn quickly. I would always look for different angles and enjoyed that part of things. One of the guys who I admired the most was a guy shooting for our competitors called Adam Pretty, and he would always find different angles, and he inspired me to try and find different angles as well. This is taken with a fisheye lens, shooting through the window underneath a pool, which quite a few of the pools sometimes have these windows. But you can imagine shot with slide film, transparency film, sometimes indoors, very low light, the grain, and trying to get the fastest shutter speed out of these photographs in order to get these was not easy. As I said to you, the company that had hired me back in October 1998 were the official photographers to the AOC, the Australian Olympic Committee. And 12 months prior to any Olympics, there is what's called test events. And they are a complete rundown of every single event that's going to be held at the Olympic Games other than the opening and closing ceremonies. Most people don't know that these occur, but they're to test the infrastructure and all of the processes and procedures. And I spent probably 6 out of 12 months leading up to the Olympic Games in Sydney, flying back and forth. And with that, I got a bit of a name for myself. And this was, in fact, a prototype of the torch. I don't know that, I think the design had probably been released, but no one had actually seen a physical, a physical torch. And this came with his own entourage. I was hired by an external company through Sport the Library to photograph this torch. So there's my family there holding the torch. Very exciting. And there's me holding the torch as part of my role at the Olympics. I got to photograph the torch relay, or parts of it, and I was flown to Uluru, my first time to Uluru. I didn't know how cold it could be in June or in the winter in Uluru. And I took very little clothing, and I'm wearing everything I can. And I still remember being freezing cold. The sun might be out, but it was freezing cold. The wind was cutting through, etc., etc. And I still don't own one of those torches. One of these days, I'm going to buy one and I'm going to mount it with some of my favourite photographs from the Olympic Games in there. I played my cards right. I remembered. I remember fondly photographing the Olympic Games. I was one of 9 photographers working for this company who got to go. And I remember at the time sitting in the media centre with my boss, and he was commenting on the fact that it was all kicking off tonight, and he was looking for volunteers to go to the opening ceremony. And he basically put it like this. He said, "Who here absolutely has to go to the opening ceremony?" Well, I would normally be somebody who would say, "Oh, look, I'll be kind, I'll share it around, or I'll let somebody else have that privilege. I'm the young guy here." I shot up my hand and I just said, I absolutely want to be there. And we were positioned in and around the stadium at various places to get various different photographs. I was, as you see, side on here. This, for those who know photography well, is not my greatest photograph from the Olympics, but probably one of the hardest to execute. This was shot on slide film with a 617 panoramic camera that I borrowed from CPL. Darren Roker at CPL looked after me for many years to begin with, and I'll acknowledge him more in this presentation. But this was incredibly difficult to expose for, not knowing whether or not I was under or overexposing the photograph. So I probably did a fair few brackets of the exposures to get it right, but you only have 4 photographs per roll of film. So really you don't have an opportunity much to get it right. It's not like you can say to these guys, "Hey, I didn't get that photo. Can you just all go back and I'll get that shot again?" I think this was from a closing ceremony. I was positioned sort of diagonally opposite from that previous photograph. So I got to go to both the opening and the closing ceremonies, which was obviously a huge thrill and a huge highlight for me. With that, worked my ass off. You would start at often 6 in the morning, travel to the media centre out at Homebush. I was staying with a friend in town. So it was a good hour commute out to Homebush, get your brief for the day, go to your first event, which would often start at 9 or 10 in the morning, work all day, get back to the media centre probably 10 o'clock at night, put your film in for processing, then go grab some dinner, grab your film after dinner and sit down for probably several hours till 2 or 3 in the morning, processing your film, putting labels on everything, and then starting the whole day again. It was the hardest working I've ever done. I literally would fall asleep behind the camera sometimes, but obviously a great experience to photograph all sorts of events, including this. This in particular, let me come back to that. Lance Armstrong competing in the Sydney 2000. This is the time trial around Centennial Park. I hope I've got that name right. This one here, famous for several reasons, in that Marion Jones, of course, has been disqualified from all of those gold medals that she won because she's a cheat. But the story for me is that, as I said, you would go to the media centre and get a briefing every day or twice a day. And in this particular evening, my boss said to me, "I'd like you to go to the athletics tonight." And I said to him, "Okay, sure, no problems. Tell me, what's on?" And he goes, "Well, it's a quiet night at the S tonight. There's the 100 men's and women's final, and there's also the 400 metres girls race, which has got Kathy Freeman in it." And I was shitting my pants. I was just like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I mean, you check your film, you check your exposure 100 times over. We're not shooting digital. We're not able to take a shot, go, yeah, that exposure is right. Okay, I'm nailing it. You're just constantly checking to make sure you don't stuff this up. I was actually second shooter, thank God. So you can see that I'm not front on to the finishing straight. I'm actually around the corner. My role was to get the reactions afterwards. And so this was my shot of Marianne Jones winning the 100 metres women's final. I don't have one of Kathy. I couldn't find it, I'm afraid. And in fact, I do need to acknowledge Jeff Crow at Sport the Library. Jeff Crow at Sport the Library for allowing me to show these photographs because they're not mine. They're copyrighted to Sport the Library and the AIC. Sorry, I've got somebody at the gallery door. Just not a call. So with that, Kathy actually, for her race, was actually right in front of me, just across to the right of where this photograph was taken in the blocks to take off. I can't remember the photographs I got, but she was right in front of me. And then she sat on the tarmac afterwards, and I got photographs of her, you know, obviously very overwhelmed. I must say that I am many, many, many years later, I got to hear the radio broadcast from Bruce, especially afterwards, and hear the crowd in that broadcast. And I can remember at the time thinking how loud it was, but to hear that broadcast again for the first time gave me absolute goosebumps. I could tell you when she enters the main straight simply by the volume of the crowd in the broadcast that I hear back. It was phenomenal, probably, you know, one of the best experiences of my life photographically, for sure. Things changed a little after that. It's pretty hard to continue as a sports photographer if that's everything you want to do in life, but it wasn't for me. I got my words mixed up there. If that's something that you saw as a career choice, I guess, you know, you just keep going on. And I was actually contracted to do the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics in 2002. But I actually quit my job several months before that, which was it a blessing in disguise? Maybe, maybe not. I wish I'd gone, to be honest, but it didn't happen. I quit my job. I'd done everything I could in sports photography, and I was really a little bit sort of like bored of it. And what I mean by that is that I would go to all these events and they weren't a challenge for me anymore. I knew what to do. I knew what I was doing. I'd get the same results, and really I just didn't see it as a career for me. So I left my job and went and worked in a corporate job for several years because I thought that was a career path for me. And I just found myself missing my job, missing my photography incredibly, and I knew that I wanted to get back into it. In the meantime, my daughter was born. Who wouldn't want to take as a photographer your photograph into the birthing suite? And she was born via cesarean. Unfortunately, both our kids were breached, and so they had to be born via cesarean. It wasn't our choice, but that's the way it was. And I remember my wife at the time saying, if it was a natural birth, she would have loved for me to be down the other end to witness the crowning of Ella coming out, etc., etc. And I said to her, if you want me to ever have sex with you again, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be at your end. Thanks very much. So that's where I was. I'm very queasy. If any of these shows come onto the TV where they're cutting things and scalpels and all the rest of it, I have to look away. I can't handle it. The best way for me to witness the birth of my children and not get too queasy or faint in the birthing suite there was to have my camera in my hand. And this is shot with, I would have said, one of my first digital cameras, a Canon 20D with a 16 to 35 mm lens, something like that. And with that, I got this photograph. She's still attached to the umbilical cord. She's just been pulled out, and she hasn't taken her first breath yet. I absolutely love that photograph. It brings tears to my eyes every time I see that shot. Of course, as a photographer, she would get a fair bit of photographs taken of her. It was very sporadic, I must say, and I'll tell you why in a second, but we had some great times in the bath. Bath times were always a special time for me, and so I'd often bring the camera in and try and avoid getting wet. And then we welcomed the birth of our son 3 years later, Oliver. So Ella and Ollie, and this is just a little clip I found. I didn't even know I had this of them in the bath together just recently, or a long time ago actually, but just found this recently.
It's gonna start getting warmer. Sergeant will get warm. Dad, put your phone in there. It's not waterproof.
Yeah, it is waterproof actually.
What? Drop it in the water, I dare you.
Yeah, the phone's waterproof.
Okay, fill me up.
No,
I just want to drop it in, please.
no, we're not dropping it in the water,
Why? It said it was waterproof.
which means generally.
So there you go, wanting me to pass their phone over to them so they can drop it in the water. I do actually remember before iPhones, I had one of the Samsung flip phones, and that was the latest and greatest. And I took Ella to swimming training, and Ollie was in the pram next to me, very bored. So I handed him my phone. He played with it for a bit, and then he tossed it, and I went straight into the pool and sunk to the bottom. So that was the end of that phone. So he did actually ruin a few phones for me in the end. Thanks, Ollie. You can pay me back another time. Our first day of school. For Ella, just love that photograph. Who doesn't? The kids going off to school first day, and she somehow wanted to take a photograph of me, I think. So she's not shown an interest in photography since. But what have we got there? Canon 5D, first Mark I, I believe. So this would have been 2007, something like that. They've grown up a bit since then. Here's one of the few photos that I've been able to find of all three of us together. I'm sure there's plenty more. Ollie these days is far more into skimboarding. In fact, he is very obsessive about many things, but tends to sort of get on with one thing, drop it like hotcakes, and then move on to the next thing. At the moment, he's very much into skimboarding. So my sports photography skills sort of come back, thinking of cool angles to get on, and encouraging, I guess I have to remind myself to keep photographing them and documenting them, because I haven't done a great job of it, and I'll tell you why in a second. But he gets quite frustrated like his old man when he doesn't get something right. He's a bit of a perfectionist. So there's always some good reactions to be had where he's screaming at himself or he's kicking the water and carrying on a tree. But he's a good kid. And his voice has certainly dropped since that video I showed you. Not moving on from there, but backtracking a bit, I've sort of tried to theme this rather than put it in chronological order. When I got my corporate job back in 2002, I only lasted 18 months. I was made redundant only 3 months after Ella was born. I was in the IT consulting game, and using my psych and sociology degree to work in change management in IT. And that was pretty upsetting. I survived 5 rounds of redundancies before my turn came up, and they paid me, a small fee to get out, so to speak. And with that, it was quite fortuitous because it had only been that week that I'd been lying in bed talking with my wife at the time about what I was going to do in order to get back into my photography. And in fact, my plan was to leave my corporate job at the end of that year. Ella was born in June. September, I was made redundant without a job. Obviously devastated that I was a new dad and I didn't have a job to supply my family with the income that they needed. In fact, what we did was start a portrait photography studio called Ella and Friends Photography. And this was above my then wife's optometry practice called Bayside Eye Care. It's still there in Martin Street in Brighton, right next to the Gardenvale train station. And in fact, the windows that you see above there where we had this little makeshift sort of studio, I guess you'd call it. We didn't photograph in there. I didn't have space to photograph portraits in a studio per se, so everything was done on site. So we specialised in doing kids and families on location. And with that, we did a really good job of it. We photographed, probably 200 portraits every year. And we would actually raise money for various charities. What became, thanks to a gentleman called Tero Said, who I consulted to me at the time. He was my business coach. He encouraged me to do what's called book projects, which was it's a lead generator. So you charge a nominal fee, like $75. You donate that to a charity, but in return, what you do is photograph these kids, publish your own beautiful coffee table book, and they get the opportunity to then purchase the book if they want to, and obviously purchase photographs. So that became a lead generator for us all throughout running Ella and Friends Photography, and the business became, quite big, sort of bigger than Ben-Hur. We ended up with 4 or 5 staff, full-time manager. That's where I met beautiful Mary. And we graduated from above my wife's optometry practice to this huge 150 square metre space on the corner of Park Street and Kingsway in South Melbourne. And this is the foyer entrance area here. There's Ella in the front center there. And this is, we had a separate room in order to photograph, but we also had this viewing room, we call it, which is where obviously all of our clients would see the photographs and purchase them from there. That ran at that place for about 4 years. We moved from kids and families into dogs. One day, Mary did a presentation or a purchasing appointment with some clients who had a dog. They brought the dog in, and she came out of the purchasing appointment with this stunned look on her face. And I said, babe, what's wrong? And she said, you'll never believe what just happened. The mother skipped over all the photographs of her daughter and then just was besotted with the dog and bought all the photographs of the dog. And with that, the light bulb moment went off for her, and she said, we need to photograph dogs, not kids. And I said, can we do that? Can we just change overnight? She said, absolutely, let's do it. So we positioned up, we repositioned, we pivoted, I guess you'd say. This was shortly after the GFC. We repositioned ourselves in the marketplace as being Melbourne's #1 pet portrait photographers. And with that, we became quite infamous, I guess you'd say, and quite a leader in that market. And we donated all of the money through all of the books that we would publish to charity. In fact, once I sold this business back in 2014, we had donated over $100,000 in the short 10 years that we've been around to various charities through the kids book projects as well as the dog book projects. These books, we did 6 of them in the end. They would be 350 pages, weigh about 3.5 kilos, a commercial print job printed in China. And they were 30 by 30 centimetres square. They were beautiful books. We didn't compromise in any way in terms of the paper quality, beautiful French fold jackets, gloss paper, all the rest of it. They were absolutely stunning books. But it was time to move on from there. That was 2014. Well before that, I realised that I needed to get out and photograph my landscapes a bit more, and I'll tell you how my landscape photography career started out. But we started running workshops. Now, I know every man and his dog operates or does workshops these days, but back then, this was 2005, I decided, after seeing some ads for landscape photography workshops in Outdoor Photographer magazine from the US, I saw in the back of this magazine all of these ads for these workshops. And I thought, well, is that something that we could do here in Australia? So I approached my good friend Glenn Campbell, who was a member of the AIPP at the same time that I was, and we teamed together in order to photograph, in order to run these photographic workshops back in March 2005. We ran our first workshop down the Great Ocean Road. And we ran them all over the place. This is down the Otways. We'd run a rainforest and waterfall workshop, and we'd go up to the Victorian High Country and up to the snow at Mount Buller, Mount Buffalo, all sorts of things. And that's where it all started for me. And of course, 15 years later, I'm still running these workshops. They were quite unique in a sense that they are and always still remain to be workshops rather than tours. We always allow the opportunity to be able to download our photographs, to work on them. This was back before Lightroom. We were teaching Photoshop, for example, here. And then we kind of broke through in the market when we got approached by the Great Outdoors to come along and document one of the workshops that we ran. And this is Tom Williams down the bottom left-hand corner there, and the whole crew. And they came along and they did a piece on us and our workshops. So we generated a lot of publicity through that particular piece on the Great Outdoors. Where did my landscape photography career develop? That was back in 1997. I did my first landscape photography, serious landscape photography photo shoot on the overland track in Cradle Mountain in Tasmania. Now, before that, when I was a teenager, I used to have a bookshelf in my room that was filled with books, coffee table books of National Parks of Australia and all sorts of things. And I would take myself to bed an hour before I had to turn the light out in order to grab, my selection of books for the evening, to then sit up in bed and just pore over these books. So I would always consume this sort of visual content well before I became, a landscape photographer as such. 1997, my dad walked to the overland track, invited me to come along, and so I went. This is one of the photographs from that trip that was published in the Australian Conservation Foundation diary a few years later. I just found this in one of my scrapbooks. And so that was the start of it. What happened for me was that this is not my photo. This is by another famous photographer who you might know called Ken Duncan. Shortly after going and doing the overland track, I walked into his gallery here in Southbank in Melbourne, and I saw this photograph and saw that it was from the overland track in Tasmania, and said to myself, well, I didn't see that. How come I didn't see that? And who is this Ken Duncan guy anyway? I was just amazed at his photography, and the light bulb moment for me when I walked into Ken's gallery was to actually just a light bulb moment went off where I said, hey, this photography, this landscape photography, this doesn't need to be a hobby. This could actually be something I could do as a career. Because I think my belief up until then was that landscape photography was something done by amateurs, by hobbyists, by bushwalkers, and it probably largely was. But Ken and, of course, another gentleman, Peter Lick, took it mainstream, and they started selling, obviously, their beautiful art to collectors who wanted to have these beautiful photographs hanging on their walls. And so with that, I made it sort of my goal or career choice to shoot landscape photography and to travel all over Australia and the world to photograph. Look, he's got an ego, and so do I, so I thought I'd do my version of Peter Lick there. I haven't quite got the muscles there, so I need to hit the gym again, I think. But I think I've got the same sort of stance, haven't I? Yeah, I probably need not quite the hat and the look, but anyway, I'm working on it. There's a hat. I've got to meet many other wonderful people through, obviously, photography, not just my workshop participants, but other famous landscape photographers here. We've got Tony Hewitt, Peter Eastway, Christian Fletcher, etc., etc. So traveling all around, taking beautiful photographs, it's not a bad career, is it? And so here's a selection of some of my favourite photographs just more recently that I've taken. What's the question there, Adam?
All right, we had a question here from Cheryl. She asked, changing careers, albeit still within photography, did this feel a bit scary? Was it a bit daunting?
No, I'm one of these people that I'm a type A personality and I get bored pretty easily. So if I decide that I'm done with it, I'll move on pretty quickly, and it's just a matter of sort of finding that next thing. So with the sports photography, I did that full time for 3 years, decided that I was done with that, became a portrait photographer running my own studio for 11 years. And then underlying all that, I've been a landscape photographer since 1997, both, amateur and professionally. I like photography that it gives you that ability to switch between genres, I guess you'd say. That if you decide that you're a wedding photographer, but you really want to do portraits, you can take that skill set from one to the other. Did I find it daunting? Of course, I probably would have questioned myself many times. You don't know the number of times that I've questioned, even more recently, whether or not I should be doing this landscape photography gig. I'm sure Adam's nodding. He's no doubt had those thoughts as well. It's natural, I think, to question yourself, particularly as a creative. But I haven't found it daunting as such. I've more relished the opportunity just to move on and do something else that I find that is more engaging than what I'm doing before.
Thanks, mate.
This was one of the best photo shoots that I've ever been on. I think you'll see this in another presentation that's on my website about my top 10 favourite photographs of all time. I hope it's in there. It should be. This was Moreaki Boulders a couple of years ago for a workshop that we ran in the middle of winter, and my first time there. And one of the most incredible sunrises I've ever seen, one of the most incredible light opportunities that I've ever seen as well. I've never seen light really as good as that. And it only lasted a couple of minutes, but it was quite incredible. So that's certainly a favourite of mine. And of course, more recently, we started offering workshops at Lake Baikal in Russia, these most amazing ice caves, Faroe Islands in the North Atlantic Ocean, some spectacular landscapes there, Namibia in Africa. So my photography has taken me all over the world. What was a real breakout for me after doing the overland track in 1997 was, there's a question there from Susan regarding what camera do I use. Do you want me to answer that one now, Adam? Yeah, it's quite relevant to sort of bring it in here. After my overland track shoot in 1997, I quit my sports photography job, as you know, at the end of 2001, and I immediately booked myself a trip up to the Red Centre in order to photograph Uluru, Ayers Rock, I should call them Uluru, yes, Uluru, the Olgas, and the West MacDonnell Ranges. And I spent 2 weeks travelling through that region by myself. This was one of the first photographs that I got on that trip. And I was using a borrowed panoramic film camera from Darren Roker at CPL Digital. At the time, I couldn't afford one of these cameras. It was good $5,000-$10,000 for the lens and the camera. Might have been $5,000 each or something like that. It was a lot of money and I just couldn't afford one. So Darren very generously would allow me to borrow this camera, and I took it away for a couple of weeks. And this is obviously on slide film. I used to use Fujichrome Velvia. This is 120 roll film, much like you put in a box brownie. And over the years, I've probably shot something in the order, I think, of about 400 rolls. I estimated that's something in the order of about $20,000 to $40,000 worth of film and processing. And this one, in fact, was entered as part of the 2003 AIPP National Awards. This is my first time entering, and this received a silver award. I didn't know Photoshop very well at the time there, even though I'd used Photoshop in my sports job. I remember using Photoshop version 3, I think it was, back in 1998. Can you believe it? That was still when Photoshop was a dirty word. Yeah, using this panoramic film camera and travelled all through this sort of Central Australia area, just, you know, obviously wanting to release my creativity, wanting to do something different other than sports photography. And some of my favourite photographs came from this trip. In fact, this little spot here called Fish Hole in the West MacDonnell Ranges is on the Larapinta Trail for anyone who may have walked that trail. This was at the time when it was still being built. So it wasn't very well marked. I got lost several times and I was out there by myself in November. It was a pretty stupid thing to do. But I camped this evening, my first night on this trail, on the dry sand riverbed of this little watercourse here called Fish Hole. And I'm a very nervous camper and still am. Something between the sun going down and me going to sleep causes me quite high anxiety. And I don't know why. There's a nervousness that I have. I think it's, you know, the boogeyman coming out to kill me or something like that, right? And so I would often try and get to bed early so that I could fall asleep quickly and the following day wake up without this nervousness. And this particular night, it was very hot. You've got to remember, this is mid-November. It's probably 20, 25 degrees at night. Sleeping in my tent, nature calls. I need to go to the loo. I get up. I'm standing there in the middle of this sandy riverbed with nothing on, feeling slightly self-conscious anyway. But all of a sudden, as I'm doing my thing, I'm looking down, of course, and there comes this shadow. My shadow is being cast on the ground below me. Like I've got this huge spotlight on me from a police helicopter saying, "Excuse me, sir, can you please not do that here?" And I was shitting my pants. I look up and there's this meteorite streaming towards the ground, so close that I felt like I could reach out and touch it. I'm talking maybe a kilometre away, not even. It's so close, obviously, that it's caused this huge shadow on the ground. Just before it hits the ground, the light disappears. God knows what happens, right? Well, you can imagine that caused my anxiety levels to go through the roof. I've run back to my tent, curled up in the fetal position and rocked myself to sleep. I think it probably took me about an hour to go to bed. That's when I really thought the aliens were coming to get me. But it was a very memorable moment, and I had a very successful trip afterwards, for example. Maybe it was an omen, but at the end of the day, I do remember that being one of the highlights of walking the Larapinta Trail. This was another photograph that I entered in the 2003 AIPP National Awards that I did well in. This received a silver as well. Some of my favourite landscape photographs are from my early days, and why that is I think I had some natural talent to be able to compose a photograph, but I probably didn't have that experience that I have now, and so therefore a lot of it I think was probably arse, and I'm quite impressed that I able to ask these ones, so to speak. This one was interesting. This one was taken at a place called Mount Kate Hut, which is on your way to Crater Mountain from the entrance to the national park. I went there in 2004, 2005, I think it was. They had this huge sort of once in a decade snowstorm that put 2 feet of snow down on the ground over the course of several days, and they closed the national park. So in order for me to get in there, I had to walk along the road for 8 kilometres in order to get to the lake and photograph it. And what I had in mind that is I wanted to photograph Cradle Mountain, covered in snow with this beautiful blue sky in the background or some nice clouds, etc., etc. I really wanted to sort of capture that image. And instead, what I ended up doing was seeing nothing but cloud for about a week. But every morning I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I would walk for 2 hours by myself along this road to get to the lake by sunrise and be incredibly disappointed because, of course, it was just goddamn awful weather. But the upside to that was that I was able to capture this shot. Some of you may have already been to this spot, which is Mount Kate Hart. It's next to Ronnie Creek, which is on your left-hand side, about 1 kilometre before you get to the shoreline of Cradle Mountain, or Dove Lake, I should say. One of my favourite photographs, again, from my early days, shot on film. This is another favourite of mine. This is not an overly spectacular shot, but it holds a lot of good childhood memories of me, for me, in a sense that my parents used to take us down to Cape Schanck and we'd go for a picnic. It seemed like every Sunday. It was probably not that often, but we'd have a barbecue and then we'd walk along this. I just remember it being this very narrow trail with all of these trees coming over the top. We'd walk along this trail to the beach and then come back again after lunch. This is the trail that we would walk along. So many years later, once I got more into my photography, I went back to document this. This is coastal tea tree down at a place called Fingal Beach. This again has received, I think in 2004, this received a silver award in the ARPP National Awards. This is Mount Buffalo and the cathedral, it's called. Now, I want to talk a little bit about pre-visualization. I told you already that I consume a lot of media when I come to photograph, and I look for a lot of inspiration. This photograph came about because I saw it on the front cover of a DL-sized pamphlet from Parks Victoria advertising the Mount Buffalo National Park. And the photograph on the cover was actually taken during the summer, so there was none of this snow around. I did a little bit of research to realise that in fact it does get snow at certain times of the year. So I made it my goal to go up there and shoot what was a similar image but with snow in it rather than without snow. So that's how this photograph came about. I'm a big believer in drawing inspiration from other people and other photographs, but then putting your own spin on it. This is a photograph that we have printed in metal, about 1.5 metres high, that's currently hanging in the window of my gallery just here. I don't shoot a lot like this, but I want to shoot a hell of a lot more like it, which is obviously shooting into the sun. Karijini National Park, we've run a fair few workshops there and we've got a good collection of photographs from that area. This is Red Bank Gorge in the West MacDonnell Ranges. I did a fantastic trip with my dad back in 2007 along the Gibb River Road where I did a lot of photography. This is a place called Leonard River Gorge, Cape Leveque, north of Broome, for example. I'm just flicking through some of my favourite photographs from over the years. This is Mitchell Falls in the Kimberley. That glow on the water is caused by this waterfall being in shadow. The sun's already dipped below the cliff face here, but the tall escarpment behind this waterfall is in fact still illuminated with the beautiful red glowing sunset. So that's reflected back onto the water's edge there. I love that. It's still one of my favourite photographs. Ironically, most of these photographs I've never had printed. Only since opening the gallery have we really started printing some of these photographs. I love the snow. We run a snow photography workshop up at this place every year. This is Dinner Plain in Mount Hotham. Some of my favourite photographs have come from this area. I have a workshop presentation on my website, which is all about mood in your photographs. And this is part of those these photographs are part of that presentation that has about 130 examples of mood in the landscape. And it goes for about an hour. Just a little plug there. This one here, this is the Snowy Mountains. So I do love photographing in the snow and I love snow camping. And I've been doing it for about 15 years now. And every year I try and get up above Thredbo onto the Snowy Mountains. Some of the coldest and most dangerous conditions that you can get in Australia. Sometimes there's just no place to hide up there. The wind can blow at least 100 kilometres an hour. And so it just means that you can really be exposed up there. Go on, Adam.
Katrina asks, well, she says, these are gorgeous, gorgeous photography. Where do you print and what media do you prefer?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Where do you print your images and what,
yes.
and what media, what paper media do you prefer?
I'm going to answer that question in a second.
Okay.
I've got a few more slides, but I do have, just remind me, Adam, when we come to the photographs of my gallery
Okay.
that I have, and I'll answer that question because it'll be relevant, I think, then, if that's okay.
Perfect.
But in short, I use a few different printers depending on what medium I'm printing on. And we offer through the gallery here canvas prints, photographic framed prints, of course, metal prints, and also acrylic prints. And I'll show you some examples of that in a second, but please do remind me of that, Adam, when we come to it. So this is what I do. I love the challenge of photographing in the snow. I love getting around in the snowshoes. There's a snow shovel just sitting out the front of my tent there. I generally go by myself. There's not too many other stupid people who want to come with me to do this. And this is a North Face Expedition snow tent. You could basically take this up Everest and it would survive. And I have all the gear such as, minus 29 degrees sleeping bags and all sorts of stuff. I generally carry about 35 kilos worth of gear. And with that, I barely have room for my camera gear, let alone everything else. It's all about survival rather than photography sometimes. And photographing in the snow like this is particularly challenging. One particular year I went up there. This was a photograph from that same trip. I was tent bound for 24 hours because I went up there in July, which I soon realized was not a good thing to do. But I saw that there was a period or a window in which to go and get some good photographs. But I was tent bound for 24 hours as the wind just blew and blew and blew and blew. And I actually had to dig myself out of this tent several times in the evening, because what happens is that the snow accumulates around the backside of where the wind is coming from. So of course you position a tent with the back to the wind, so to speak, in order to not have the snow blowing into your tent and making everything damp and wet. But the downside of that is that all the snow accumulates at the entrance, and several times in the night I would wake up and see that the top of there was hardly any room left at the top of my tent door there to get out. So I'd bash it and dig it out and hope that I wouldn't become entombed in this tent and have to cut myself out, etc., as well as the risk of asphyxiation. This particular trip was not a good trip for me. After 24 hours of being stuck in the tent, I was bored, so I went for a walk once the wind calmed down a bit. And I said to myself, I'm just going to walk in a straight direction that way for an hour and then come back on myself, and there can't be any problems, right? Well, of course, coming back, I lost my way and really did think that I had lost my tent, and that, in fact, I was going to have to camp out the night and make a sort of makeshift shelter. But thankfully, I came across this rocky outcrop, which some of you may know. It's quite a famous sort of landscape structure now. I call it the Granite Tor, but it's at a place called Ram's Head Range above Thredbo there. And I saw this and then knew where my tent was from there. So thankfully, right at the last minute, I found a good spot. I stayed up there for several days, but I did the wrong thing in a sense that the weather got better, and I told Mary that I was coming home that day, but then I decided that I was going to stay up an extra night. And she was away at the time doing some consulting work in Sydney, and I hadn't come home. And the weather, actually, a cool change came through that same evening, and I got just hammered like you wouldn't believe. Again, nowhere to hide, the wind blowing a gale. It's the only time I've had to pack up my tent with the pack inside the tent and pack up the tent last, because if I didn't have something to hold down the tent would have flown away. Me being inside the tent is good enough, but actually not having anything to weigh it down as you're packing it up just meant it would have blown off the mountain. I never would have seen it again. I thankfully got out of there the following day, walked to the top of the chairlift, and I said to the guys, so when's this running? And they said, well, it's not running anytime soon. The wind's too strong. And I said, well, when do you think it'll start up? And they said, no idea. I said, so how do I get down? And those who perhaps have been to Thredbo and seen the Kosciuszko Express, it goes for about a kilometre all the way up the top of the mountain to the very top. It's the easiest way to access getting up onto the main range and into the backcountry there. And they said to me, well, you're just going to have to walk down. So I walked about halfway, and just remember I've been out for 3 or 4 nights already, pretty battered and bruised. And I got to about halfway down, and one of the chairlifts was running on the more sheltered side of the mountain. And the guy takes one look at me and he goes, geez, you don't look good. What's wrong? And I said, well, the weather we've been having the last few days, I've been out in it by myself up there. And he goes, oh, you're crazy. He said, jump on. get down as quick as you can. You need something in you. Went straight to the cafe, got myself a coffee, a sausage roll, get some sustenance back into me. By this stage, my phone had run out of battery. Mary was wondering where the hell I was. She was ringing around trying to find out where I was, ringing my dad, ringing family, friends. No idea where I was because I was supposedly supposed to be home that night. And I plugged my phone into my car, and then obviously it went berserk with all the messages. These were the days and still the days where iPhones batteries don't last very well in the cold. Little did I know that they'd started trying to look for me. They'd rung Threadbow and said he's up on the main range. We don't know where he is. He was due home last night. He's overdue. They said, well, look, let's first check his car to see whether it's in the car park, because obviously if his car's not here, he's not here. He's left. And Mary said, well, he drives a silver Subaru Forester. And they did a search of the car park and found 31 other silver Subaru Foresters. So that didn't help. They said, well, what's his rego? Well, she didn't know. She didn't know my rego. I can hardly remember my own rego. But she'd remembered that I'd posted a video on Facebook a while back where I'd photographed this or videoed this high tide down the beach, and I'd panned across and actually shown my car. So she took a still frame of the video and then grabbed my rego from that, and then relayed that to the search parties. Thankfully, they hadn't come out and done a full-scale search. I would have been very embarrassed otherwise. But I rang Mary as soon as my phone fired up. Hi, babe, how you going? And she burst into tears. And she just said to me, don't ever do that to me again. And the emotion in her voice was incredible. Showed how much she really cares. And from that day, she went out and bought a GPS, a Spot, I think you call them, the Spot device. In some of the photographs, you might see that hanging off my backpack. But that can track you everywhere you go. Every 10 minutes, it sends a signal up to the satellites. And literally, she can log into an internet connection, log into a website and be able to see my every move. So I now carry that with me wherever I go, because I certainly don't want to have that be my last photo shoot. I've since been up that way to photograph many times. This is a place called Carruthers Peak in the distance there on the left. Some of my favourite photographs I've taken up that way and camped up there several times. Spring is often the best time to go. The weather's calmed down a little. You've still got lots of snow up there, but you haven't got those big storms that come through in July and August. Another little adventure. How am I going for time, Adam? Am I all good? Am I prattling on too much?
Good. You got as much time as you like. People can come and go and come back and see the replay if they've got other things to do, mate. I've got a couple of other questions here. I've got a couple other questions here, Tom.
It's nice time to break.
Yeah, beautiful. One from Andy Woodman. How much aerial/drone photography do you do? And maybe you're going to cover this shortly anyway.
Yeah, in a second. I'm still dragging my heels with other adventures. We're sort of pre-aerial stuff. Most of my work that I do these days is aerial.
Okay.
And a little bit of drone, but I'm going to get onto that in a sec.
All right, we'll cover that then. That was really it, mate, for now, actually. There was just that one question. We'll let you keep going.
All right. Yeah, perfect. Another adventure that I've had where I've got a good story to tell, which is this place called Ragged Range, which is in the Kimberley. Years ago, when my dad and I did the Gibb River Road back in 2007, we camped by the side of the road. And with that, I saw this amazing mountain range in the distance being lit by this gorgeous sunset. And I did some research to realise that it's this area called the Carboy Ranges. And in fact, this section's called Ragged Range. It's a series of beautiful granite domes. It's been photographed only a few times. Cole Porter did some aerial photographs for his books many years ago. Ken Duncan has in fact landed a helicopter on one of the fingers on the escarpment way back in the distance there. How do I know that? Because several years later, I went back wanting to photograph this and climbed up. I don't think on my screen you can see my cursor, I'm afraid. But in the distance, right in the middle of the frame, you'll see an escarpment area with some high cliffs. Not the one in the foreground, the one behind that still. I went there several years ago to photograph this from the ground and left my run too late. I couldn't estimate how far it was from the road, this very dodgy, dirt, isolated road. I couldn't work out how far it would take me to walk from that road to get to the ranges. And it was mid-afternoon and I thought, I don't want to be walking in the dark to get there. I don't want to get lost. I'm out here by myself. So I went back the following year and left myself plenty of time. I took 6 litres of water with me. And by lunchtime, I'd already consumed about 4 litres.
wasn't very well at the time. I had this sort of cold that was going on. I started hallucinating. I was getting very dizzy. I was climbing up all of these ridges. I would have climbed up 3 or 4 of these looking for a spot to get to, looking for this Ken Duncott, viewpoint, and got to the base of those cliffs, realizing there was 8 to 10 meters of sheer cliff in front of me that I was never going to get up. That's when I realized that he'd obviously taken a helicopter up there. But I didn't give up. I was there to get this shot. I wasn't coming back again the following year. So I walked along the sort of right-hand side there. You see that sort of flat plain area, and eventually found this spot to get up. It was quite hairy. And in fact, 1 or 2 people have asked me how to get there since. And I don't give away the spot lightly, simply because if you're out there by yourself and something happens, no one's going to find you in a hurry. So I found the spot and camped up there overnight, because the only way that I was going to get these photographs was to bivouac overnight. This faces west, so this is a sunset shot. West is to my right, okay? And I actually contemplated again with my high anxiety at camping out at night, whether or not I should get down and actually walk out that same night. And I said, "You're crazy. You won't do it. You're tired. You're exhausted. You're not well. You should just stay up here the night and camp." So I carried very little with me. This is my pack, as you can see. I've got my ICU from my f-stop bag there. I've got some water, some Natural Confectionery Company jellies, my phone, and my sleeping bag. I didn't even take a sleeping mat. I just wanted to go really light. So I slept out on this ledge or this rock. You can see that the distance, this is with a wide angle lens. So really the distance between the left and the right here is probably 5 meters, something like that. And I slept out there overnight. I do remember it was pretty cool to be out there. And one of the sort of memorable moments was that at about 3 a.m, I was woken up by this bright shining light in my face. There's something about these bright shining lights. And the full moon was rising up over those beautiful granite domes that you see here on the in the shot here. This is my setup. This was my panoramic film camera shooting this area. And in fact, why I don't have, there's one of the final shots that I ended up getting with that camera, and many others from this little spot. I haven't been back since. I'd love to go back. I'd love to fly a drone all over that stuff. And in fact, I've got a few of my mates who have sort of put out their hands and said, "Yep, if you're going, I want to come with you." I just hope I'm still fit enough to get to this particular spot. Maybe we just need to do a Kenny D and hire a chopper and do it that way. But there's some beautiful country in and around that area, and I'd really love to go and explore it a bit more. Moving on, I've had quite good success, as Adam said at the start of the presentation, with awards. I've been entering photographic awards since the mid-90s, and with very much mixed success. I don't win everything, fortunately. Got to share it around, but sometimes my photography isn't just good enough. This one here was 2014 runner-up for Photograph of the Year in the inaugural International Landscape Photography of the Year competition. And this was one of my favourite shots from a shoot that we did on a workshop at Fraser Island in Queensland several years ago. The top image here was actually one of the only gold awards that I've received through the AIPP. Those who don't know the story behind this, this was one of those cases where you sort of wish you had your camera on you and then realise that you do. I was doing some work in between, whilst I was getting my portrait studio up and running. I was working for a friend of mine who I'd met through sports photography. She was running her own little company, and I did some work across town. One evening I came back in, I think it was June. We very rarely get fog here in Melbourne, but there was this beautiful fog and very still, of course. And I saw these people playing sport on the sporting fields right next to Albert Park Lake here in Melbourne. And I kind of had this vision of like this Close Encounters of the Third Kind, people coming through the mist and fog towards the camera in a similar way to the photograph in the middle here. And I kind of was lamenting the fact that I didn't have my camera, because I still don't often carry my camera in the car unless I know that I'm going out photographing. But of course, it dawned on me the fact that I'd been for a shoot to do this job for this lady. And I did, in fact, have my camera with me. So I pulled over, started taking these photographs of these guys taking this or playing this sport that I'd never seen before, which is called ultimate frisbee. And from what I understand, it's a bit like rugby, where you sort of play in teams and you try and pass it from one team member to the other and get it into your end zone. So a little bit of a cross between sort of rugby and gridiron perhaps. And I shot for about 10 or 15 minutes, and before I felt that I'd got some good shots. But one of the first shots I took that evening was that shot above. And I really love the timing of that shot, and I love the mood of these particular photographs. And that shot up top ended up winning a gold award in the AOPP State Awards.
Magic.
So I've done a fair bit of
Just one
Go on,
second.
Adam.
That's an absolutely breathtaking shot. I can see how you got a gold for that. I just have one quick question referring back to your adventure photography. Daryl just asks, what tripod do you hike with?
Oh, that one at the time was just a little enduro sort of fold-up thing. Now I still hike with a carbon fiber Siru tripod. I'm not sure how much it weighs, but I don't sort of compromise with my tripods. I want to bring something that's sturdy, that goes to the right height, and but is still lightweight. So that's what I use these days. And I can post the particular model number if it's on my website. If you go to my website and go to shop tripods, you'll see the tripod that I sell there and the one I use currently. So I've done a fair bit of judging in my time. This was sort of a breakout image for me. As I said, I've been entering awards for many years. Mid-90s, I was with my bird photography entering the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. That's the world's most prestigious wildlife competition for those who know it. It gets around 30, 40,000 entries every year from 100 odd countries. If you win that competition, you know, like you've made it as a professional wildlife photographer. I was entering my bird photos and not getting anywhere. One particular year, I decided to enter, but with some landscape photographs. And rather than the customary sort of email or letter that says, you know, thanks for your entries, we had a very high standard this year and unfortunately you weren't successful. This letter that I opened was a fair bit longer. And with it, it said, congratulations, your image has been selected as part of the 100 or so images that was awarded. And this was awarded in the Praise of Plants category, that I still think they have that category. I don't consider myself to be a plant photographer as such. This is more, for me, more a landscape photograph than anything. But I was limited by the number of photographs I could enter in any one particular category. I think it was 3 at the time. So I put some in a landscape, and then with these others that I had, I threw them into this other category. This was taken at Charlotte's Pass back in 2005, I think it was, March 2005. A beautiful old snow gum. It was freezing cold. I didn't bring enough clothes again, you know. This cool change had come through the night before. I was attending a Fuji breakaway workshop at the time up there at Charlotte's Pass, and this beautiful sort of moisture had formed onto the snow gum and brought out all those colours. So since then, this image went into the beautiful coffee table book that they make, that gets sold at bookshops. You may have seen it, but also is exhibited in the Natural History Museum in London every year, and they do syndications of this exhibition all around the world. So kind of put me on the map in that regard. I also got contacted by the photo editor of National Geographic regarding this image as well, which was pretty special. There's a question?
Yeah, Tom. Relating specifically to this image here, is this a rainbow eucalyptus? Asks Swati. Do you know whether that's a rainbow eucalyptus or what type of eucalyptus that is?
Snow gum. It is the snow gum. No, it's not a rainbow eucalyptus. I now know what he or she is referring to. We don't have naturally occurring rainbow eucalypts here in Australia, I believe. I know that Peter Licker's done some photography of those in Hawaii, but I've never seen them, so I don't think we have them here in Australia. This is a snow gum, which is obviously found at higher altitudes in the alpine regions of Australia. This one here is quite unique in a sense that it is so thick in the trunk. It's probably hundreds of years old. In fact, the title for the exhibition was called Ancient Snow Gum. It wouldn't be possible to wrap your arms around that, for example. The colour I have found with these snow gums is more intense in the autumn time, and it's also enhanced by the fact that there's moisture on the trunk as well. You'll see on the underside of that picture in the sort of centre to the left that it's very dull in colour. There's drips sort of going down underneath the trunk itself where it's showing off more of the colour. If ever I'm photographing these and I have a little bit of spare water in my water bottle, I tend to sort of pour all over the trunk to bring out the colour and do a little bit of cheating. But I always try and climate so that I don't have to do that as such and bring out the natural colour and let nature do its thing.
One more question, Tom, while I got you there. Doug Porter has asked, do you think competition judges are tougher now than in the past?
I haven't noticed that as such. I wouldn't say that. I just think I think the standard's equally as high as what it used to be in the past. There seems to be a lot, more photography in the world these days than there was in the past with the advent of phones and digital and the cost of cameras being affordable to almost anyone. I think it's just super competitive at the end of the day. I mean, I consider myself extremely lucky that I'm doing quite well at the moment and have for the last few years, but I don't expect it to last either. I think it comes down to a few things, whether you do well in these competitions. It comes down to the uniqueness of your photograph. I'm a strong believer in that. I think it also comes down to, the stars aligning for you. Does the picture strike a chord with the judges enough that it's going to stand out from everything else they see? If you're judging thousands of photographs and one stands out because it's a very unique viewpoint or it's a very unique subject matter, things like that, it's more likely to stand out, of course, and therefore perhaps be awarded. I find that my aerial photography is being well awarded at the moment, but I don't expect that to last either, because I think people will just go, oh yeah, here we go, another aerial photograph. So I just think it's my end point, I guess, is that I think it's a potluck. At the end of the day, there's no formula to follow. I've got an ebook on how to win photo competitions. I know you've got a fantastic series of videos on it as well, Adam, and you've done far more research into it than I have. So for those who are perhaps interested in entering photo competitions and wanting to do better, download each of those products. I have my thoughts and feelings about it. I'm sure yours are similar, Adam. But at the end of the day, I never enter a competition thinking that I'm going to do well. I just think it's just so hit and miss. At the end of the day, I think you've just got to keep entering. I think the reason that I do quite well in these competitions is that I do photograph or enter a lot of competitions. I photograph a lot, but I also enter a lot of competitions, probably 10 every year, where I spend anywhere from sort of $500 to $1,000 entering. And so therefore, if you're throwing your hat into the ring, more often than not, you hope that you get rewarded. I think it's a bit of a numbers game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, mate.
No worries. Okay. Speaking of which, this is an image that's done very well for me more recently. This is called River of Fire. And this was an image that just won the panoramic category in the Fine Art Photography Awards. But also, too, it was successful for me in winning the International Photography Awards, Nature and Aerial Photographer of the Year. And as I showed you with my beautiful little trophy here that sits in the gallery, this one was really probably my most prestigious award thus far. I was intending to include the photos in this presentation, not the winning photos, but the ones from the previous year. I'd entered the International Photography Awards, not very well known here in Australia, based out of the US and far better known in the US than it is here in Australia. But I'd entered sort of back in 2012, 2013. I've done all right, got a few sort of nominations, which I don't really count as being an award. And I'm just having a little dig at somebody right there, but I won't say who. And then I sort of revisited several years later, not last year, the year before, let's say 2018, I entered again with some aerial photographs of Shark Bay. And I came second in the aerial category, which is drones / planes, helicopters, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, second, I'm really pleased with that. And my mate, Scott McCook in Perth, says to me, geez, mate, you did well in that comp, but I much preferred your portfolio to the guy who won. And I said, oh, geez, thanks, mate. I really appreciate that. He goes, yeah, his Shark Bay pictures weren't as good as yours. And I'm like, what do you mean Shark Bay? And he goes, oh, the guy who won had some Shark Bay photos as well. Well, just coincidentally, the guy who won that category had been to Shark Bay, shot some aerial pictures, entered them in the comp. He won that category and I came second. So I was like, bugger this, I want to do better. And so I was really motivated to want to do better. I entered the following year, being last year, and I entered at the start when it sort of opened up for the first time. Sometimes these competitions have like a 6-month entering period. They might announce the award winners, enter the following year's competition straight away, and you might wait 6 months or longer, sometimes 9, 12 months before you know how well you've done or not done. So I forgot all about it. And I was at Lake Eyre last September, and I get a message from my girls here at the gallery to say, I think you better check your email. There's something pretty special there. And I was having all sorts of problems with my laptop. My keyboard needed replacing. I could turn the computer on, but I couldn't navigate and type or anything. It was real dog's breakfast. I said, look, I've tried getting into my computer. I can't access my emails. You're going to have to tell me what it is. So she takes photos, screenshots, and sends it to me on Facebook Messenger through my phone. And I'm just reading it, just going, oh my God, what? So of course it said that I'd won, and I won with a series from Iceland last year. So I was very pleased with that. And all of a sudden, this barrage of emails comes from them over in New York saying, we'd love you to attend, and we've got all these different functions for you to go to. And if you're able to make it, we'll put some money towards your travel, et cetera, et cetera. I remember ringing Mary and just saying, babe, have you seen that message I sent you? And she goes, nah. And I said, well, I won that aerial category from those awards, and better still, I've won the nature category, because the aerial category is a subcategory within the nature category, and the nature category has about 10 subcategories. So what they do is they judge your photos. You know, if you're lucky enough, you win the subcategory, aerial photography, but then they get all of the subcategory winners like, you know, macro, landscape, water, you know, underwater, all the rest of it. They get all those together, and then they look at all those portfolios of subcategory winners and then say, right, whose portfolio is the best out of all these? We're going to award that the nature photography of the year. So I won both the aerial as well as nature, and hence why I got to go and accept that award. So I said to Mary, the year before, I told her that I'd come second in the aerial category, and they invited me to go over. And she said, oh, great, we're going. And I said, babe, we're not going. It's a lot of money. If I win something, let's go. So of course, the following year I win, and she says, right, we're going, let's do it. So all within a couple of days, we'd wrangled our 5 kids and got them all looked after. There was no workshops that I was running at the time. We had my girl who works here for me in the gallery available, and literally booked the plane tickets almost straight away. So we spent 2 weeks away. We visited a good friend of mine in LA on the way, who's also a fabulous aerial photographer. Roger Fishman is his name. You want to look him up. Visited him and spent some time in LA, and then we went to New York for a week, and obviously had a fabulous time. We got invited to the judge's apartment in New York to celebrate on the first night. We had the trophy presentation on the second night. Excuse me. And then on the final night, they have what's called the gala event, and that's a black tie event in Carnegie Hall. And some of you may know Carnegie Hall. It's a famous spot in New York for functions, events, presentations, performances. They invited us there in order for, they call it the Oscars of photography, the Academy Award of Photography. They had big gold statues, and they award the overall International Photographer of the Year, which unfortunately I didn't win. But they also hand out a whole lot of awards to industry professionals who they sort of acknowledge, you know, industry professionals who have made a contribution to photography throughout their careers. One of which last year was Annie Leibovitz, who I'm sure you'll have heard of. So rubbing shoulders with Annie Leibovitz. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get on to aerial photography, because that's my passion and genre these days, and what I've done quite well in. This is my choice here to shoot with planes and helicopters more than anything else. This is all of our planes warming up at Lake Eyre, taken in the last sort of 12, 18 months, where I've run a number of workshops up at Lake Eyre. And so if you want to learn more about Lake Eyre and my trips there, I did a presentation last Monday night on Lake Eyre. It goes for about an hour and a half. You can download that through my website. I'll give you all the details then. Just a gratuitous selfie taken from a helicopter over the Great Barrier Reef a few years ago. And then more of this stuff. That was from an aerial shoot that we did August last year with the helicopter over Fox Glacier in the Southern Alps. And I hope I've got a few of those shots to show you here. I'm not 100% sure, but they're certainly on my website as well. But I got into aerial photography because I was bored with panoramic landscape photography. I was inspired by the Ken Duncans and Peter Licks of the world to photograph panoramic landscapes for about 15 years or so. But I got a bit bored of that. It became a little bit sort of mainstream and a little bit easy for me. And as you know, I don't like doing things easily. So I was always looking for more ways to explore landscape photography and keep me engaged. So I was using a 7200mm lens to shoot a lot from the ground and shooting things that took my fancy that I felt were more abstract and harder to see, you know, detail on the trunks of trees and just all sorts of unusual patterns in the landscape. And then when I fell in love with aerial photography and discovered that a few years ago, well, I discovered it well before then. I was thinking back in my head how long ago I did my first aerial photo shoot. And it was in fact before I even did that overland track walk in 1997, when I was in Hawaii photographing my first Hawaii Ironman triathlon back in 1996. We took a helicopter flight over the volcanoes there and that lava that spews out into the ocean and causes that massive steam plume. That was my first, I think, aerial photo shoot. Since then, I've done a hell of a lot more of it, of course, and I love that idea of being able to photograph something very abstract from the air and creating something that I feel is far more, in my mind, far more artistic than, and challenging to photograph and challenging to see than panoramic landscapes. So I've really enjoyed photographing these more recently. And these are some photographs here from Shark Bay, where we've run a number of aerial photography workshops last year. And I just love being able to be up in the air, looking from above, looking from that unique perspective. I love the color, but I love the patternings. I love the repetition. I love nature doing it all for me. And in fact, I'm going to show you how little post-production work I do to my photographs at the end of this presentation. Hang around because in the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to show you a little bit of Lightroom post-production. I don't do a lot of what Adam does in Photoshop. I am a chocolate box photographer. I know Mary hates me saying that, but what I mean by that is I love creating pretty pictures in the camera. I love getting it right in camera. I'm not casting aspersions or saying anything about Adam's photography or anybody else who uses Photoshop, but I'm just a different type of photographer. I like to see a beautiful photograph in the landscape and capture it the best way I can with my camera. And so you'll see with the 99.9% of the photographs that I shoot from the air are uncropped. Okay, I like to get the cropping in camera, and that comes a lot from my sports photography days, in a sense that when we were shooting with film and very early Photoshop days, we were selling to the clients by putting a contact sheet of slides onto a light box, and they were coming into the library and looking at these slides and choosing which photograph they were going to purchase for a commercial reason just by looking at the photograph itself. So you had to have perfect cropping, you had to have perfect composition, perfect exposure. That's where I learned to shoot, you know, more than anything else. Those 3 years shooting sport taught me so much about photography, and in particular, getting it right in camera, because my boss would go bananas if I stuffed up the exposure or stuffed up the cropping. He'd just look at it and go, I can't sell that. That's poorly cropped. It's too loose. You might as well throw that in the bin. You know, if he's paying me to go to all of these sporting events, not just here in Victoria and Melbourne, but in Australia and internationally, I went too. You know, you've got to get it right. So this is pre-digital days. This is really pre-Photoshop days. When we were using Photoshop, we were merely using Photoshop to perhaps correct the exposure a bit and maybe crop. But ideally, we'd be showing people the exact slide on the lightbox rather than showing them a computer image. And these were the days where you just scan a whole bunch of slides using a Nikon Cool Scanner slide scanner. I'm not sure if people are familiar with those. And you literally, you'd buy this sort of attachment to the scanner that held about 50 slides, much like a slide carousel for a slide projector, and you'd attach it to the side of the scanner, and you would program your computer to just individually take one slide in and out and scan it and then replace it and move on to the next one. So I do love capturing the landscape from above, and I do it very much by getting it right in camera first. Pretty much with exposure and definitely with the cropping. I love being able to create in the camera itself and not worry about having to fix it up later in Photoshop or Lightroom or anything else. This is a series of photographs from Namibia last year over some saltworks. This recently did well, I think, in the Epsom Pano Awards or in the International Photography of the Year, one or the other. Okay, how are we going, Adam? Any more questions?
At this
We've got
point,
a few
no.
people on. Had a few people drop off. What's the time, Adam?
We are 11:40, mate, but that's okay. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Go on for about another 10 or 15 minutes, guys, if that's okay. Please come back and watch the replay if you need to. Just going to talk a little bit about Lake Eyre and also my post-production. I just found this newspaper clipping the other day of my obsession with Lake Eyre was many years ago with birds in particular, of course, and this newspaper clipping from 1990 when they had a big flood and they had 50,000 pelicans, adult birds, nest on Lake Eyre. These days I go to Lake Eyre more often than not to lead photographic workshops, and I believe that I was one of the first here in Australia to offer aerial photography workshops. And we have sometimes just 2 or 3, in fact most of the time, just 2 people in these planes in order to have uninterrupted views of photographing from above. So these are some of my favourite photographs from Lake Eyre. I've done 60 hours of flying over Lake Eyre thus far. Seem to sort of know the place like the back of my hand. Still haven't found your lens, unfortunately, Adam, but I'll keep looking. And really love that part of the world for its uniqueness in terms of landscape photography, in particular aerial photography. I'm not the first, I'm not the last to photograph this landscape. I'll never claim that I'm doing anything, groundbreaking as such. I just love photographing from above. Now, some of these photographs ended up being a part of an exhibition that we had here in the gallery. Okay, late last year, we printed about 12 or 13 of these. And this is my gallery from the outside. Excuse the toilet paper in the entrance there. We were having a bit of fun with that when the coronavirus thing started. And that's what it looks like from above. It's, for those who don't know Main Street, not from above, from the entrance. Those who don't know Main Street, Mornington, it's about an hour's south of Melbourne. It's more like a seaside sort of suburb. And it's got about 200 to 300 shops in this main street. And this one here is about 70 square meters. It's about 10, 12 meters deep by 4 meters wide. And we can sort of house about 10 or 12 large format photographs in the gallery itself. This was our first year celebration that we had late last year. And these are the photographs that we put up on the wall from Lake Eyre. We did something a little different for that exhibition in that we, and getting back to the previous question we had regarding paper choice and paper types, this was something where we didn't actually frame any of the images, all bar one on the back wall there next to my name. We actually printed them on a beautiful 300 gram cotton rag paper and then magnetized them to the wall. So they were unframed. We sell everything framed. We don't sell them unframed. But for this particular case, to do something a little different and to make it a little more organic and to really show off the texture in the photographs from Lake Eyre, we actually did these unframed, and people were touching them and looking at them from side on, wondering if they were 3-dimensional, stuff like that. It went off particularly well. Go on, Adam. Oh, yes.
One
Sorry,
second.
I thought you were muted.
You're right. Couple of questions. Robin asks, when the world's obsession with aerial photography ends, what's next? Or, what's your opinion on that? We'll start with that one.
Yeah, that's a great question, Robin. It's not something that has gone unnoticed or not something I haven't thought about already. I think, like with any genre, I'd like to think that with any genre of landscape photography, let's stick to landscape photography, that sure, fads or favorite genres that come and go. Aerial photography, I think, is big at the moment because of the advent of drones, of course, and so that's become a popular choice for a lot of photographers to do that because it differentiates themselves from others, or they just like photographing that genre. Mark Gray, who's down the road here, some of you may know, he has had a gallery here in Main Street, Mornington for about 7 or 8 years now. He still continues to sell his panoramic photography in that gallery. Ken Duncan still, Peter Lick, has 15 galleries in the US selling all of his panoramic landscape photography. So I'm not sure that the aerial photography is going to sort of drop off the perch and no one wants to purchase it anymore, or they don't like it anymore. I think it may well, get even more popular than it is now, perhaps, or it may become less popular. Who knows? At the end of the day, I'll still continue to shoot it so long as I enjoy shooting it, and so long as it speaks to me creatively. I don't shoot aerial photography because it's in vogue. I don't shoot it because I want to be popular and want to win all these awards. I shoot it because it speaks to me creatively. For me to express myself as a photographer best at the moment is me being up in the air, capturing what I consider to be works of art. When people come into the gallery where I'm in today and they view these aerial photographs on the wall and they ask whether in fact they're photographs or whether they're paintings, I just look at them and go, that's the greatest compliment you could give me. If you think this is a painting rather than a photograph, I've done my job as an artist, because I want them to look at these and go, no, that surely couldn't be a photograph. Like, how would nature create that? And yet I've been able to present it in a way, whether it be unframed prints on the wall with a beautiful cotton rag paper, or it might be under glass, but it's such a unique abstract photograph that they can't fathom that it would be an aerial photograph and that nature could create something like that. You've got to remember, if you come into my gallery and you see on the wall, I'm looking down to where it is at the front here now, it's got my story. And years ago, a few years ago when I opened the gallery, I was encouraged to write a biography about why I do photography. And I remember saying to Mary, because I love it, it's me, it's creative. And she goes, it's more than that. And I go, oh, it's because I like creating pretty pictures. And she said, no, it's more than that, it's bigger than you. And I said, bigger than me? What could be possibly bigger than me? And she said, it's beyond you, it's more than you. What is it about? And I said, you know what? It's about me being outdoors, being in the landscape and honouring the beauty of the landscape. I once met with a photographer who I greatly admire down in Tassie called Rob Blakers. And if you haven't seen his work, you've got to see it. I mentioned him in my presentation on my website on the online workshops tab about a presentation I did on the top 12 photographers I admire the most. And Rob, I met with a few years ago, and I said to him, Rob, what is it about you that drives you to create and be the landscape photographer that you are? And he said, I'm more an environmentalist. I'm more somebody who's passionate about the landscape more than anything else. He said, my photography is just a way of recording that. And he's an outstanding photographer. Outstanding. I think he's good, is just if not better than Peter Dombrowski. His work is unbelievable, right? He gets himself into all these places, being a bushwalker and being passionate about the environment that most people don't get to. And with that, he creates beautiful, unique images. And for me, it's the same. I could, if somebody gave me the choice of going out into the landscape and not taking my camera versus just being able to have a camera and go, and walk the streets, I'd say give me the landscape without the camera any day, because I love that solace. I love that sort of like almost meditative type sort of trance or thought pattern that I get into when I go out to photograph, and being in touch with nature and seeing the beauty of nature more than the photographs themselves. I love recording, don't get me wrong. It's in me to create. I've been photographing since I was 13 years old. So it's 32 years now. It's, taken up 2/3 of my life. But at the end of the day, if it's aerial photography that I continue to do for the next 10 years, so be it. If it's something else, that will present itself, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you, mate. Yeah.
To answer that question.
A couple of others just quickly whilst we're on the gallery. I just want to remind you to talk about the various mediums that you like to print on, as in paper, acrylic, etc. And the second question was one about drones. Which drone do you use, and do you do much drone, or is it mainly helicopter, light plane, aerial work?
Yeah, Kay was just agreeing with Rob Blakers. I'm glad you know his work as well, Kay. I'll answer the first question regarding paper types. I use a variety. As I said in the gallery here, we offer framed prints, acrylic prints, metal prints, and also canvas prints. Everything is a finished product ready to take home and hang on your wall. And in fact, what we do here at the gallery is we offer a service whereby that if you live in Melbourne or the Mornington Peninsula, which is where I live, I come and deliver that for you and hang it for you. Okay, so that's an extra service we offer. these prints that I did of Lake Eyre were printed on a 300-gram cotton rag, beautiful Canson paper, for example. We've printed these, we've framed these, we've put them on the walls of a few homes here in Australia, and I'll show you a couple of those now. We do acrylic prints, like they look like glass. We do just traditional, photographic paper, luster paper underneath frames, but we also do, high gloss metal prints as well. So I get it printed depending on what the client wants, and they often take my advice in terms of what they think would look best, not only in their home because of the furnishings, but also the print itself. What's that going to look best as? I'm going to get to the drone question in a sec, Adam. I just want to talk about this print. As part of the exhibition that we had on Lake Eyre, this was purchased, this photograph became sort of like the signature piece of the exhibition, and this was purchased several times. In fact, I only print, of all of my aerial photographs, I only ever print 10. I keep one for myself, and then we make the other 9 available to collectors. So they're very unique pieces. This one here was one that we hung in a home nearby for Gary and his beautiful daughter, Jess. And Jess Shepherd, look her up. She's an amazing photographer. She was at the Bright Festival of Photography last year. Gary fell in love with this piece, put it on his staircase. You can imagine this would have been a bit of a nightmare for Mary and I to hang. It's on Facebook. If you send me a friend request on Facebook, you'll see all of the behind the scenes photographs from it there. But I love the fact that people love the images so much that they actually want to purchase these for themselves. And this is 150 by 150 centimetre square print of this image called Nature's Eye. I do live here on the peninsula now, and love photographing more than anything else when I'm at home. So I like to spend a bit of time at home photographing. This is from Hastings. This one here is from Arthur Seat, looking out over the ocean. And with that, I've created a beautiful coffee table book called The Mornington Peninsula that we sold here through the gallery last year. We're actually sold out of print, and with this particular book, it was very well received and very much liked by the people who come into the gallery. So with the books that I have done through my gallery, and also the books that I've done through my portrait studio, I've published about 10 commercial books. And when I say by commercial, I'm talking about print runs of 500 to 1,000 or more, where it gets printed on an offset printer, it gets printed in China, shipped back here to Australia. And so big books. One of the ones that I found here in the gallery that many people won't know of was one of the first books that I printed on Cradle Mountain, Lake St Clair National Park. This is a small A4 or A5 book, I should say. That was one of my first books that I printed. This, again, is out of print. We printed 3,500 copies of those, and that sold out a few years ago. Since then, no, where's that print? I've missed it. Where is it? It's not in this presentation, bugger. Since then, I've sold out of this book and then wanted to print another book because it's a great product to sell here in the gallery. I had a photograph of the cover. I was going to reprint this book, and then Mary said to me, why don't you do something different? So in fact, what I did was this summer, in order to set myself a goal and to be motivated to go out and shoot, I set myself a goal to shoot for the next book all within 4 weeks over summer. This book that I'm showing you here took about 20 years. Some of the photographs were very early on, where that Cape Schanck Trail photograph that I took, 20 years ago. So that took about 20 years to photograph. This one, I wanted to be a really short time frame so that I wouldn't get bored or unmotivated or drop the ball on it, lose enthusiasm. And I called it the Mornington Peninsula Summer Edition. And I set myself the goal to shoot it from sort of Christmas through to the end of January. And with that being summer, we decided to fill the book just with photographs of people enjoying the Mornington Peninsula here during the summertime. And of course, I knew that if it was going to be full of summer photos, that I needed to do it quickly because summer doesn't last, particularly here in Melbourne, and people go back to work, etc. And in the end, it ended up being a book that was full of aerial photographs, and every shot, unlike this book, every shot had people in it, okay? This book is mostly, although the cover photo has people in it, this book is mainly beautiful, just natural landscapes. This new book, I want it to be something different. It's going to be a portrait format rather than a landscape format. And it's got to answer the question about drones, it's got 50% of the images are taken with the drone and 50% are taken from light aircraft. It didn't necessarily turn out to be that way, but in order to reach my goal of photographing this within 4 weeks, I wrote down a shot list of all the photographs that I wanted to get to include in this book. And with that, I got about 50% of the photographs from this light plane trip that I did in early January. But then I realized that there were some photographs that I wanted that I couldn't achieve without using a drone. So I upgraded my drone to a DJI Mavic 2 Pro, which has got the larger 20 megapixel Hasselblad sensor in order to get the best quality still photographs, because I was using it more for stills rather than video. But in the end, I shot a lot with it and I really enjoyed that. I don't consider myself a drone photographer. I'd much prefer to shoot from planes and helicopters. It's probably the most popular question that's asked here in the gallery. Are these taken with a drone or with a light plane or something else? In fact, most of the time people say, are these taken with the drone? And I say, no, they're not. And they look at me and they say, well, how are they taken then? And I go, well, you know, before drones, we had planes and helicopters. So here's a little video that I wanted to show you of that book project that shows you some of the drone footage that I would shoot alongside of the still photographs. And this is this goes for a couple of minutes. This is more just an advertorial, I guess you'll say, for the Mornington Peninsula for those perhaps who haven't been. So there you go. There's the beautiful Mornington Peninsula there for you. For those who perhaps haven't been, come on down. We have a great part of the world here, and I'd love to show it to you. Just to finish off the presentation, because I know time's getting away from us, I just wanted to show you a couple of images there from the presentation that I did from Lake Eyre, and show you how I come to process these. My computer seems to be running a bit slow, so I hope this doesn't hold us up too much. But this one I call Lake Eyre Lady, and I want to show you, I want to teach you a little bit about how to process aerial photographs, but I also want to show you how little I do to my photographs in order to polish them, and I guess reinforce what I've said earlier in the presentation about how little I do to my photographs and how I'm really wanting to get it right in camera. Although I do notice that Timothy Moon has been on this presentation. We should have blocked him from the start. He gave me a hard time about this the other day. This is the photograph itself. This featured as part of the exhibition that we had. And this was the image that came out of camera. We're up at about 3,000 or 4,000 feet to photograph this huge clay pan that has this face in it. And what I do with all of my teaching in Lightroom is that I try and teach it in a way that you work backwards. So sometimes I hope that you'd have in mind that this is the photograph that you want to end up with. And it's very easy, I guess, to process if you have a pre-visualization of what you want the photograph to end up like, but then you just work backwards in order to achieve that result. Sometimes you don't know, and you start and you play around and you end up nowhere. Other times you play around and you're on the right track and you get the result you want. But I'm fortunate that I've been doing this for many, many years. And I didn't always have this skill, by the way, that when I look at pretty much every single photograph I have, I know what I want it to look like and therefore what I need to do in order to achieve that vision. So with this one here, I found this several years ago when photographing Lake Eyre. Not the first to find it either, by the way, but I'm so glad I have found it. Not an easy spot to find, but I always had it in mind that that's how I wanted to look. So with that, the first and foremost, what I need to do is correct the fact that it's on an angle and I want to tilt it towards me. If I come down here to the transformation tool, I can tilt this towards me vertically so that it is like we're shooting straight down, even though we're not. It would be very difficult for us to achieve this looking down effect in the plane because we'd have to go extremely high. We generally fly at about 2,000 feet. I'd probably need to be about 7,000 or 8,000 feet or more in order to get this shot, okay? So we compromise by only going up to about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. It's very cold at that temperature when you've got the door open and it's the middle of winter. So the higher we go, the colder it gets. So we don't want to do that. But we can compromise just by shooting a little loose, allowing the space to be able to then crop this photograph as a one-to-one image, okay, as a square crop, get rid of what's below us there. And you could even crop in a bit tighter here. And you could even take that into Photoshop just to fill in those edges on the side. But let's not do that today. By just tilting the photograph towards us using this transform tool and then using the crop tool, I've been able to crop that out. From there, I just need to then, bring it to life. Often in Lake Eyre, the colors are quite benign and the photos can look very flat. You'd know this, Adam. So the dehaze tool, I'm not sure if you use that or you probably do the equivalent in Photoshop. To me, what it does is add a lot of contrast, saturation, and some clarity. And so by adding dehaze, it's bringing that more to life, as you can see here. I'm not ramping up the whole way because it becomes very contrasty, very muddy there. I'm only taking it as far as I need to, and I'll adjust that if need be. Now, it is dark, and the histogram tells me that if I drag up the exposure slider, it really drags up the midtones and takes it to be sort of wishy-washy. All I want to do is keep that contrast, but make the whites whiter than they really are. And so by dragging the white slider up to the right, but not too far, otherwise I start blowing out my highlights like that. If I take that up as far as I need to, pretty much without it blowing out the highlights, that's what I've got here. Now, I find the clarity slider is very good for sort of adding grunge, but in this case, the dehaze has done that grunge for me. So I'll just add a little bit of the texture slider. I might also add a little bit of saturation, okay, just to bring out those beautiful warm tones on the left-hand side of that image there. And then sometimes if I feel the image is a little flat, with its lighting across the whole image, I'll add a vinaigrette there just to lift it a little more. And with that, adding the vinaigrette there that you'd normally put on a salad, I might just need to revisit and go back and just up the whites or maybe even the exposure slider a little, just to make that picture look as good as it does. So you can see we've come from sort of this image and gone to that in very few steps. And that's what how I like to teach my post-production. Again, this is probably more post-production than I would normally do to a photograph, because most of the time with my aerials, I'm just having to tease out the color that's already there, not do this transformation and crop and all the rest of it like this. This is an exception to the rule. So you can see there that with the transform, the vinaigrette, and then a few sliders here, I've been able to achieve this result very similar to this one previous. I've been able to achieve this result within about 5 or 6 steps. And I don't tell my clients who come into the gallery to purchase this work, I don't tell them very often, but I do tell them literally that the nature has provided this for me, and I spend literally no more than 1 or 2 minutes on each of these photographs to get them to print quality. I'm not going to process this one because time's moving on. I have that in another presentation if you're interested. I want to show you just this last one, which is Nature's Eye. This you saw on the wall of Gary's home. And this one here has become sort of a signature piece of mine from Lake Eyre. This is how it looked when I photographed it. Okay, so not entirely what I wanted it to be. It's not circular how I'd like. So again, we're not shooting right over the top of it, unfortunately. Very difficult to position planes. Unlike helicopters that are very maneuverable, it's very difficult to position planes to be in exactly the right area, to be right over the top looking down. Sometimes you're too far away, sometimes you're right over the top. Often you need to shoot on a bit of an angle here, and with that we haven't got what we need. So I'm going to just play with the transformation tool here a little, see if we can get what we want. That's made it a little bit more circular. I'm going to go up here again to the crop tool and choose the 1:1 ratio here. I noticed here that this is far too loose in its crop. Let's get some symmetry happening here because I love symmetry. Okay, let's get that pretty much in the middle of this square crop, which it is there. Double click and execute the crop, and you'll see that by doing 2 easy steps, we've got to exactly where we want to be with this image. And then again, the dehaze tool is going to be our friend just to bring out the beautiful color there and the detail. And then dragging the white slider up. Again, it's going to make those whites white, which we want them to be. It was underexposed when I photographed it, which is okay. But then it's brought out all the beautiful color there and texture, etc., etc. It's really brought that image to life. And then all we need to do perhaps is just add a little bit more texture if that's your liking. And then with the effects tool down here, add a vignette just to darken the edges a little more and draw the eye into the middle there, pun intended, and get that shot. So I hope that's given you an example of some of the things that I just easily do in Lightroom in order to achieve what I want. It's coming towards the end of the presentation, so I just wanted to again thanks Adam for the opportunity to present to you guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I notice I've gone on far too long because I think we're up down to about 159 now, but I hope those guys are going to jump back and just see the final parts of this presentation today. If you're wanting to learn more, as Adam said at the start of the presentation, I do have a number of ebooks on my website. Just go to tomputt.com, tomputt.com, go to shop ebooks, and you'll find a whole selection of ebooks there. Some are free, some I just ask for a small amount in order to just maintain the website and keep that up and running with all its cool functionality. But I hope there's some interesting ones there, including this one, which I called Holy Crap on Board, Get Me Out of Here. This has got about 30 points or 30 ideas for you in this time. If you are bored and wanting to get out and do more of his photography but can't, here are some ideas to keep you busy and engaged during this time. One of the tips that I've left out of there, of course, is to watch Adam Williams Creative every day, 10 o'clock on YouTube. The second thing is that I have a series of online workshops. I do a presentation through my Facebook group every Monday night at 8 a.m. and every Thursday at 3 p.m, except today because I'm doing this presentation. But we record all of those sessions and we make them available through my website, shop online workshops here, and you'll see a various number of presentations. I've done a review of the Epsom Panel Awards Top 50. I've got presentations on Lake Eyre, as I said, Karajini, Shark Bay, etc. I've got some Lightroom sessions there as well. Some I've asked just for a small fee, again, just for my time and to keep the website up to date, stuff like that. But check those out. I think there's now 14 online workshops and presentations there. If you want to watch those live, as I said, just jump on Facebook and jump onto my group called the Tom Putts Tips and Bits. This is my training group or my training website online. So just go onto Facebook, Tom Putts Tips and Bits. If you are not on Facebook, just go onto my website. As I said, we record all of these sessions and they're available to download afterwards. And if you want to see more of the behind the scenes work that I do, both on my workshops, I don't post on my personal profile a photograph of the kids and what I ate for breakfast. It's more behind the scenes of my photography. So if you're interested in that, just send me a friend request. Keep an eye out for the thumbnail there of me with my trophy. That's about it, Adam. I hope that I've done a good job there. I hope that all you guys have enjoyed that presentation. I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to present, and I hope they've got something from it. As I said to you, Adam, yesterday, when I present to anyone, whether it be camera clubs, online, what have you, my 3 goals are always to inspire, entertain, and to educate. So I hope that's what everyone's got from the presentation today.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Can I just get you to unshare your screen and we'll just wrap this up for everyone?
Of course.
Hey.
Can't have it all about me, can we?
Here we are. We'll wrap it up. Thanks, Tom. Look, I do have a whole bunch of questions myself, but rather than do that now, what I think, if you would like, or if you would be gracious enough to join us again, we might take maybe a top 5, top 10 photos and, you know, have a little bit of a conversation between myself and yourself, just candidly about your work and some stories and processing and that kind of thing, maybe in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, something like that.
Yeah, and I do have that all ready to go, in a sense that I've gone through my photos recently and gone through my sort of top 10, and that would be an interesting discussion. And I think, yeah, making it sort of less about me talking and more about you asking questions, and I'm sure many other people would have those same questions, would make it very engaging.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do like a Q&A with the audience and with the top 10 images to sort of spark conversation and do something like that.
Yep.
That would be awesome. Once again, mate, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time. Actually, before we do, setting records, mate. You set the record for the longest stream, but not only that, you set the record for the most number of concurrent viewers. I don't know what the exact peak was, but it was up around 250. Absolutely phenomenal. Wow. So thank you for that. Thanks for your time. And thanks everyone for watching along. Most of you have stuck around for the full 2 hours and 20 odd minutes or something or other. Absolutely brilliant, mate. Big thanks for Tom Putt. Like the video, subscribe for more. Tom Putt's coming back in a couple of weeks. Anything else you want to leave us with, Tom?
No, mate, just thanks once again, and you're doing great work. Thanks very much. You know, those number of people on the live feed today wasn't as much about me. It's more about you and the great community you've built here. So thanks once again, Adam.
Oh, my pleasure, mate. And thanks for having us. Stick around, mate, on the Zoom. I'll just have a chat off air. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I'll see you tomorrow morning. We're doing photo critique again tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye for now.
Something in.
What's that? Go? Yeah, go for it, mate. I think. Yeah, go. Thanks, mate.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching, everybody. See ya.